Stephen Hollis arrived at the abandoned mine tunnel with an eviction notice and a frozen temper, the paper stiff in his gloved hand.
You in there? This is private property. Come out now.
John Mercer had been expecting this. He had known the landowner would show up eventually. He pulled on his coat and moved toward the tunnel mouth.
It's 50 degrees in here, year-round. You'd be more comfortable inside.
I own this land. You are trespassing on private property.
This tunnel's been abandoned for 50 years. It's not hurting anyone.
The law doesn't care. You'll be out by Friday, or the sheriff will drag you out.
I have nowhere else to go. This mine is the only home I've got.
Stephen snatched back the notice and turned away, his boots crunching through the snow. John stood in the warm tunnel mouth and watched him disappear into the white silence, knowing the fight was only beginning.
3 months ago, I had a job and a room. Then the mill closed, and the winter swallowed everything.
He had wandered the valley, sleeping in doorways until he stumbled on the adit, an old mine tunnel forgotten by the world. The air inside was steady, 50 degrees, as if the mountain itself was breathing warmth.
First night in a week, I didn't shiver.
He moved in a few blankets, a lantern, a small stove. It was sparse, but it was his.
That squatter in the mine is like a mole hiding in a played-out hole.
You don't know him. He fixed my roof last year. He's good people.
Patricia Voss had worked with John at the mill. She wasn't about to let him face the cold alone. She filled a basket with bread and stew and headed up the snow-covered trail to the mine.
John, you in there? It's Patricia. I brought food.
Come on in, Patricia. It's warm in here.
She ducked under the timber beam and stepped into the mine. The air wrapped around her like the first day of spring.
It's like spring in here. How is this possible?
The rock holds a steady temperature year-round. 50 degrees, no matter how deep the freeze outside.
Patricia looked around at the bedroll, the dented tins, the small stove. It was threadbare but orderly.
The storekeeper said Stephen Hollis was out here threatening you. Is it true?
He wants me out by Friday. Says he owns the land and I am trespassing.
There might be something in the county records. Old mining claims or deeds that could help.
I don't want to drag you into my fight, Patricia.
You are not dragging me. I'll go to the courthouse first thing tomorrow.
The county records office smelled of old paper and dust. Patricia pulled open the heavy ledger for 1890. Her finger traced the handwritten entries until she found a mineral rights claim for the old Hollis copper mine.
Thomas Hollis. That name. Same last name as the landowner. But it could be anyone.
The Copper Falls Gazette, 1891. Thomas Hollis strikes a rich copper vein at his mine on Wolf Ridge.
This is the same mine John is living in. But what does it all mean?
She carefully copied the mineral claim and the clipping, her mind turning over the name. By noon, she had the papers folded in her coat pocket.
Tomorrow I'll go back to the mine. John needs to see this.
She gathered her things and stepped back into the cold. A new weight of hope settling in her chest, she hurried toward the mine, the documents heavy in her pocket, the name Hollis echoing in her mind. John walked into town with a straight back, but Harris was already at his post, outside the general store.
Come to buy beans, mole, or just sniffing around for another hole to hide in?
John ignored the laugh and strode toward Stephen Hollis's office, determined to appeal to reason.
I've got actual business to handle, not to argue with a squatter. The sheriff will handle you Friday.
John followed him outside, but Stephen turned on the steps and raised his voice for the whole street.
This man is a trespasser and a danger to property rights. He'll be out of that mine by the end of the week.
The few people out in the cold stared at John as if he were a thief. He turned and walked back toward the ridge alone. When he reached the mine, Patricia was already there, clutching the folded papers she had brought from the courthouse.
Thomas Hollis. So what? Another miner who gave up on this hole a century ago.
The mineral rights claim is still on the books. That could be leverage. Stephen can't just kick you out.
That night, the first real winter storm rolled over the valley with a fury that shook the timber beams of the mine. By morning, the temperature outside had plummeted to 10 below, and the snow lay 4 feet deep against the tunnel entrance.
Inside, it's still 50. Like the mountain doesn't care what the sky throws at it.
In town, burst pipes flooded the general store, and families huddled around dying fires, their walls offering nothing against the wind.
Maybe that mole in the mine wasn't so dumb after all. I'd trade my frozen stockroom for his tunnel right now.
Word reached the mine that the old Hollis cabin on the ridge had frozen solid, the windows cracked from the cold.
They laughed at me for weeks. Now they're the ones with frost in their lungs.
The mine's warm lantern glow became a beacon on the hillside, barely visible through the whiteout, but steady. John sat reading by the stove, the injustice of the eviction still hanging over him, but the world outside was proving his case. The storm raged on, but inside the deep rock, the temperature held, a quiet defiance against the winter. The storm had not fully passed, but Patricia could not wait. She wrapped her scarf tight and struggled through the snow-buried streets to the records office.
I am missing something. That mineral claim was more detailed than I realized.
She found the old claim again, and this time read every line, including the fine print at the bottom. Said document grants perpetual and exclusive mining rights to the below-ground works, unaffected by subsequent surface deeds.
Stephen's deed from 1950 is just for the surface. Thomas Hollis kept the mineral rights. Hollis, same name, but I can't find a link.
She copied the crucial passage and hurried through the lingering snow to the mine.
John, look at this. The tunnel rights were never sold. You are not trespassing underground. Stephen only owns the dirt above.
Then the law might say I have a right to be here. This could buy us time.
They both stared at the fragile old paper, the storm outside now sounding less like a threat and more like an ally.
But Stephen won't just fold. We'd need a court order. Until then, that eviction still hangs over me.
Back in his cold office, Stephen Hollis received a call. A clerk had seen Patricia copying old mining claims. His knuckles went white on the receiver.
You've been rifling through my family's land files. I'll have you charged with trespassing in the archives.
Those are public records. I have every right to read them, and you know it.
John appeared from the street, his boots crunching in the packed snow, and stepped squarely between them.
Leave her alone, Stephen. She's only trying to help me find a legal way to stay warm.
Help you? You are a squatter. That mine is mine, and I'll have the law on you both by morning.
Stephen's voice cracked with something new. Not anger, but the thin edge of fear. He stormed to the town notice board and tacked up a final eviction order, his hand trembling with cold and rage. Patricia squeezed John's arm, and they walked back through the staring crowd toward the ridge. Stephen stood alone on the frozen street, the paper flapping in the wind, his claim of ownership feeling thinner than ever. By dusk, the sky turned black. A windstorm roared down the mountain like a freight train, whipping snow into a blinding fury. John added another log to the stove. The iron glowed red, and the mine stayed steady at 50 degrees. In town, Stephen Hollis's house lost power first, then heat. The rooms turned to iceboxes, walls creaking under the wind's weight. By midnight, frost covered the bedposts. Stephen huddled in his coat, breath steaming, the cold seeping into his bones. He stumbled to the window. Through the white chaos, a faint golden smudge glowed on the ridge, the mine entrance, still lit.
I'll freeze here by morning, That tunnel is the only warm place for miles.
He pulled on his heaviest coat, wrapped a scarf, and pushed into the storm. The wind nearly knocked him flat.
Wind sounds like a wounded animal tonight, but the rock holds.
The blizzard buried the paths, but the mine's lantern burned steady. A small defiance against the frozen world. Stephen crawled upward through the drifts, his fingers numb, his mind fixed on that warm light ahead. He reached the last slope below the mine. His legs gave out, but he clawed forward on hands and knees. He collapsed against the timber frame, one frozen hand slapping the beam. A thin cry escaped into the howl. Inside, John heard something, a sound that was not wind. He pulled aside the canvas and squinted into the white.
Someone's out there, in this storm, probably dying.
He saw the shape of a man crumpled at the base of the beams, half buried in snow. It was Stephen. John stood frozen for only a heartbeat, then grabbed Stephen's coat and dragged him through the snow, into the wavering light. Inside, Stephen was barely conscious. John pulled off his frozen gloves and wrapped him in every blanket he had.
The man who wanted me out in the cold is now relying on my fire to survive.
He stoked the stove until the iron glowed, then sat back, watching the man who had tried to destroy him. The storm screamed outside, but inside the mine, everything was still. Stephen's eyes cracked open to the glow of the stove. John pressed a hot tin cup into his shaking hands.
You were right about the temperature. I haven't felt warm in 3 days.
I didn't choose this life, Stephen. I had nowhere else to go after the mill closed.
I wanted to sell the land to a developer. They'd have filled this mine with concrete.
His plan would have buried my home. Now he's warming his hands at my fire.
Stephen looked at the earthen walls, the timber beams that had held his grandfather's labor. Something in his face shifted.
I never knew this place. My father never spoke of it.
Maybe this storm is teaching us both something about what really matters when the cold comes.
They sat in silence, the wind still howling, but the air between them less frozen than before. For the first time, John saw not an enemy, but a man who had lost his way and was trying to find it back. Stephen's gaze wandered over the mine's rough shelves until it fixed on a small wooden box, thick with dust.
What's in there? That box has been sitting there for decades.
I found it when I moved in. Never opened it. Didn't feel like my business.
Stephen rose unsteadily, his blanket dragging, and lifted the box from the shelf. He pried open the rusty latch. Inside lay a leather journal, its cover cracked, and a sepia photograph of a miner with a pickaxe. He opened the journal with trembling hands. On the first page, in faded ink, was inscribed, "Property of Thomas Hollis."
Thomas Hollis, my grandfather, he dug this tunnel.
He turned the photograph over. The man's features were a mirror of his own. The same stubborn jaw, the same eyes. John looked over his shoulder, seeing the name and the face, and the pieces suddenly locked into place. The dusty box had held more than old papers. It held the secret of who truly belonged to this mine.
I, Thomas Hollis, dug this adit with my own hands in 1891. The rock keeps a steady 50 degrees, winter and summer.
Your grandfather was a miner.
I never knew. My father sold the land after grandfather died. He never spoke of this tunnel.
And now you are trying to evict the man who made this cold mountain a home.
I've been fighting my own blood. This mine was his life's work. How could my father bury this? His own father's hands dug these walls.
The journal went on to describe how Thomas Hollis worked the copper vein until it ran dry, then kept the tunnel as a shelter against the mountain winters.
He built this place to survive. That's all I am doing.
I have to make this right. I can't throw you out of my grandfather's mine.
Outside, The blizzard still screamed, but inside, the weight of the eviction had cracked. A truth older than any deed had surfaced.
I can't throw you out now. Not after learning this.
Legally, it's still your surface land. I am just a man in a hole.
There's mineral rights law. Patricia found a claim that predates my deed. Maybe you have a case.
He's offering me a legal way. But words in a blizzard can melt when the sun returns. When the storm clears, we can look into it. I'd rather have a fair trial than charity.
They shared the last of John's stew. The silence now easier than before. Outside, the wind had become a distant roar.
I was ready to bury this place in concrete. What kind of man does that to his own grandfather's work?
The kind who didn't know. Now you do. That's what matters.
The night deepened, and the two men, once enemies, sat like old partners in the glow of the stove. The eviction notice still flapped in the wind somewhere in town, but in this warm pocket of earth, it no longer mattered. The blizzard had finally blown itself out, leaving the world buried in white silence. Patricia wrapped her scarf tight and set out for the mine. She pushed aside the canvas and stepped into the warm glow. By the stove sat two men, John and Stephen.
Stephen, what are you doing here?
The storm brought him in. We've been talking.
I found the mineral rights claim from 1890. The tunnel rights were never transferred.
And it matches my grandfather's journal. He dug this mine.
Then John has a legal right to be here. You can't evict him.
Stephen reached into his coat and pulled out the crumpled eviction notice. He stared at it, then tore it slowly in two. He extended his hand, and John took it. The mine felt different now, sealed not just against the cold, but against old wounds. Patricia smiled, and for the first time, the mine felt less like a hideout and more like a home. Stephen led John and Patricia down to the town hall, where the sheriff was shoveling the last of the storm's snow from the steps.
Sheriff, I was wrong about the mine. Here is the mineral claim from 1890 and my grandfather's journal. John Mercer has every right to be there.
The sheriff studied the papers, then looked up with a slow nod. Well, can't argue with a land grant. That mineral deed is ironclad. The eviction is void. A small crowd had gathered in the cold, drawn by the sound of Stephen's voice. They watched in silence. Stephen turned to the crowd and tore the final eviction notice into pieces, letting the scraps fall into the snow.
I am signing over the mineral rights to you, John. This mine is your home now by every law that matters.
I never wanted a fight. I just wanted a place to keep warm.
The townsfolk began to clap, and Harris, standing at the edge of the crowd, shook his head in slow wonder. The old played-out mine had suddenly become the warmest address in the county, and everyone knew it. With the eviction dead, John threw open the mine entrance. Within hours, freezing families began arriving, drawn by the warm light.
Come in, all of you. There's stove heat and soup. No one freezes tonight.
I was wrong about you, son. Called you a mole when you had the warmest hearth in the valley.
Children ran through the tunnel, their laughter echoing off the stone, while their parents huddled by the stove with grateful eyes.
Here, take these extra blankets. My grandfather kept them in the box for a reason, I think.
This is what it was meant to be, John. Not a forgotten hole, but a refuge.
By evening, the old adit held more warmth than any building in town. The lantern glow spilled out onto the snow like a promise.
Funny, I came here to hide, and now the whole town's found me.
And maybe that's exactly what my grandfather would have wanted.
The mine, once called a played-out hole, had become the beating heart of the valley. And in the deep rock, the temperature held steady. When the storm finally broke, Stephen returned to the mine with a sled of lumber and a box of tools, his face no longer cold.
Those front timbers need bracing. I've got nails and a saw. We need to make this entrance safe.
You don't have to do this, Stephen.
I want to. This mine was my grandfather's, now it's yours. Let me help keep it standing.
They worked side by side through the afternoon, replacing rotted beams and sinking new nails until the timbers stood solid.
Your grandfather would be proud of you. You are finally his kin.
He'd be proud of what you did. You saved his tunnel and made it a home.
They clasped hands, the agreement sealed not with ink, but with splinters and sweat.
From now on, we're joint caretakers. This mine stays open for anyone who needs it.
And in that handshake, the last shadow of the eviction vanished, replaced by a partnership built on warmth deeper than the rock. The town gathered on the sun-washed steps of the hall, the last snow melting from the eaves. John stood between Stephen and Patricia, the deed in his coat. The mayor stepped forward and pressed a brass plaque into John's weathered hands, the crowd hushing.
I just wanted to survive the winter. Now I have a home and a community. I belong here.
My grandfather dug this mine as a shelter. Now John has made it the warmest heart in the valley.
Applause rippled through the crowd, and a sharp whistle cut the air. Harris, grinning from the back, they walked back up the ridge to the mine, where a freshly painted sign was lifted onto the timber frame. Inside, the brass plaque was mounted near the lantern, a testament to endurance.
Guess I'll have to stop calling you a mole. Mr. Mercer suits you better.
Call me whatever you like, Harris. Just keep warm.
The sign above the entrance read, Hollis Mercer Warm Shelter. The played-out mine had found its purpose, and the rock still held its steady warmth. Spring crept up the ridge, softening the snow into rivulets. John stepped out of the mine and into the warm sun for the first time without a coat. He reached up and touched the wooden letters of the sign, still amazed that a played-out hole had earned a name. Inside, his bedroll had become a real bed, and shelves lined the walls. This wasn't a camp anymore. It was a home.
Funny how a cold world can lead to the warmest place.
He smiled, looking down at the valley where the last snow was melting, and for the first time, the future didn't scare him. He sat by the entrance, a cup in hand, watching the water drip from the timbers. The silence was no longer lonely. It was peaceful.
This mine gave me back my life. I owe it more than just gratitude.
The brass plaque caught the morning light, a small glint of permanence. The mine that had been forgotten was now the place everyone remembered when the cold returned. And John Mercer, once a man with nothing, stood at the mouth of his home, ready for whatever came next. A few days later, Patricia came up the path carrying a basket of fresh bread, the scent filling the spring air. They sat on the hillside, the mine mouth behind them, the valley green below.
You've built a real home, John. It's got a sign, a stove, and a heart.
With a lot of help. You believed in this place before anyone else.
I believed in you. The mine was just the place you landed.
He looked at her, and the silence between them was full of something unspoken, something warmer than the sun. He took her hand, and they watched the sun sink behind the ridge, the mine behind them a silent witness.
I came here to survive. I didn't expect to find this.
Neither did I. But here we are.
The old mine, once a hiding place, had become the warmest place in town, in every way that mattered. John sat alone at the crate he used as a desk, the old leather journal open before him. He picked up the stub of a pencil. I came to this mine with nothing. It gave me a home, a purpose, and a family. This rock saved my life. He closed the journal and placed it back beside the sepia photograph of Thomas Hollis. Two miners, a century apart, now shared the same story in ink and dust. John looked around the tunnel, his bed, the glowing stove, the brass plaque, and felt the quiet weight of belonging.
This is home. Not just a place to keep warm, but a place with roots.
Outside, the spring night settled over the ridge, and the mine's lantern glowed like a solitary star. And so the played-out mine became the warmest place in town, not for the rock's steady heat, but for the hearts it sheltered. The ancient rock still held its steady 50 degrees. But what filled the tunnel now was warmer than any temperature. The lantern flickered once, then held steady.